Picture this, it's 321 BC and two entire Roman armies, roughly 20,000 of Rome's finest legionaries, are trapped in a narrow mountain valley with no way out. They haven't been defeated in battle, they haven't even fought yet. They've simply walked into a trap so perfect, so brilliantly conceived, that their commanders know immediately they're finished. Above them, on the steep hillsides, thousands of Samnite warriors wait in silence, spears ready, knowing that the most powerful military force in Italy is completely at their mercy. The Roman consuls have two choices: order their men to fight and watch them all die in a slaughter that won't even be a fair battle, or surrender and accept the most humiliating terms in Roman history. They choose surrender. And what happens next, the ritual humiliation that follows, will haunt Rome for generations and fuel a hatred so intense that it will end with the complete destruction of an entire civilization. But here's what nobody tells you about the Samnites. These weren't primitive mountain barbarians. They were sophisticated warriors who created one of the ancient world's most innovative political systems, built cities that rivaled Greek colonies, and came within a hair's breadth of stopping Roman expansion completely. For over 50 years they fought 3 brutal wars against Rome, winning battles that should have been impossible, surviving defeats that should have destroyed them, and creating a military confederation so effective that Rome had to completely change their entire military system just to compete. And yet, today, most people have never even heard of them. Why? Because Rome won, and winners write the history books. But the real story, the story of how mountain shepherds became the greatest threat Rome ever faced in Italy, is far more incredible than anything Rome ever admitted. Let's rewind to the 8th century BC, deep in the spine of Italy, where the Apennine Mountains create some of the most brutal, unforgiving terrain in the Mediterranean world. This isn't the gentle rolling hills of Tuscany. These are serious mountains with peaks over 1,000 meters, narrow valleys that flood without warning, winters that kill livestock and people alike, and summer droughts that turn streams into dust. Normal civilizations avoided these mountains. Normal people settled on the coasts or the fertile plains where life was easier. But the Samnites, they were forged by this landscape. They learned to read weather patterns that could mean life or death, to move through terrain that would break armies, to survive on resources that seemed impossibly scarce. And this harsh environment didn't weaken them. It made them into something Rome had never encountered before, warriors who could fight anywhere, survive on nothing, and disappear into terrain where Roman legions couldn't follow. The archaeological evidence tells us something fascinating about how these people emerged. Sites like Alfadena in the upper Sangro Valley reveal communities that started as seasonal camps, places where Bronze Age herders would bring their flocks during summer months before retreating to lower elevations for winter. But around 800 BC, something changed. These temporary camps became permanent settlements. People started building substantial stone foundations instead of temporary shelters. They constructed defensive walls, not the simple earthworks you'd expect from shepherds, but sophisticated fortifications using massive polygonal stone blocks fitted together so precisely that you couldn't slide a knife blade between them. This is engineering knowledge that supposedly didn't exist yet in Italy. These people weren't supposed to have this level of sophistication, yet there it is, carved into the mountainsides, impossible to ignore. Monte Vairano might be the most mind-blowing archaeological site you've never heard of. Excavations here revealed a planned urban center from the 7th century BC with distinct residential zones, religious areas, and specialized craft production districts. We're not talking about a village, we're talking about an actual city with urban planning organized into neighborhoods, with a layout that suggests somebody sat down and designed this place before building it. The residential areas had stone-built houses replacing earlier timber structures. The defensive walls incorporated massive blocks fitted with polygonal masonry techniques. And here's the kicker. They were trading with Greek colonies, importing Greek pottery, adopting Greek alphabet for writing their Oscan language, and creating a hybrid culture that combined mountain warrior traditions with Mediterranean sophistication. The language these people spoke, Oscan, belonged to the Sabellic branch of the Italic language family, related to but distinct from Latin. The earliest Oscan inscriptions date to the 6th century BC, using a modified Greek alphabet they acquired through contact with Cumae and other Greek colonies in southern Italy. And here's what's fascinating. Oscan preserved archaic Indo-European features that Latin had lost. It had a more complex case system, distinctive verbal formations, and sound changes that marked it as separate from the common Italic ancestor. When you see Oscan inscriptions, and hundreds survive on bronze tablets, stone monuments, and tomb markers, you're looking at a sophisticated language with precise legal terminology, complex religious formulas, and administrative vocabulary that proves these people had governmental institutions as advanced as any in Italy. Geographically, the Samnites controlled a vast mountainous empire stretching from the central Apennines southward into the hills overlooking the Campanian plain, roughly corresponding to modern Molise, eastern Campania, southern Abruzzo, and northern Puglia. This territory provided natural defensive advantages while offering access to diverse ecological zones, from high-altitude summer pastures to fertile valley bottoms. The Samnites occupied the high ground, the ridgelines and mountain passes that controlled movement between Italy's eastern and western coasts. Position yourself on these heights, and you can see armies coming from days away while they can't see you at all. Within this mountain empire, 4 main tribal groups emerged, each controlling distinct regions while maintaining remarkable cultural unity. The Pentri were the largest and most powerful, dominating the central highlands around modern Isernia and Campobasso. Their territory included the most defensible positions and controlled crucial river valleys. Archaeological evidence from Pentri sites reveals the most elaborate fortifications and the richest burial goods, suggesting this group's dominance within Samnite society. The Herpini occupied the southern mountains between modern Avellino and Potenza, strategically positioned to monitor Greek colonial activities while controlling routes connecting Campania with Puglia. The Caudini controlled the western approaches, the hills and valleys between the central highlands and the Campanian plain. Their proximity to Campania's fertile lands provided economic opportunities, while their mountain positions offered security. And it was in Caudini territory that Rome would suffer its most humiliating defeat at the Caudine Forks. But what really made the Samnites unique wasn't their military prowess or their mountain fortresses, it was their political system, the two-toe confederation that balanced local autonomy with collective action in ways that confused and frustrated Roman commanders for decades. Each toto functioned as an independent political unit, controlling specific territories, typically centered on fortified hilltop settlements. Yet these autonomous communities could coordinate military operations across vast distances, make collective decisions affecting the entire confederation, and maintain unity despite having no centralized government, no king, no dictator giving orders. How did they do this? Through a brilliant combination of religious obligations, military alliances, and shared cultural practices that created unity without coercion. Sacred sites served as neutral meeting grounds where representatives from various communities gathered to discuss matters of mutual concern. The sanctuary at Pietrabondante evolved into one of the most important Confederate centers, with its elaborate theater and temple complex providing venues for both religious ceremonies and political assemblies. The site's development during the 4th century BC reflects the growing sophistication of intertribal cooperation. Religious practices provided the ideological framework binding the confederation together. The versacrum, sacred spring ceremony, represented the most significant of these unifying practices. During times of crisis, communities would vow to sacrifice all living things born during a sacred spring. Human children were allowed to reach maturity before being sent forth to establish new settlements or join military campaigns. This practice provided religious sanction for expansion, created bonds between mother communities and their offshoots, and established precedents for collective action. The social structure within Samnite communities reflected their mountain economy and warrior culture. At the apex stood the warrior class, where military prowess and leadership in battle provided pathways to political influence. Elite warrior burials from the 5th and 4th centuries BC contain elaborate assemblages of weapons and armor, demonstrating both individual wealth and the importance of martial display. A particularly rich burial from Alfadena included a complete panoply of bronze armor, decorated breastplate, greaves, helmet, alongside iron weapons and gold ornaments. The technical quality combined with elaborate decoration indicates specialized craftsmen working for wealthy patrons and suggests the existence of professional military elites. Farmers formed the backbone of Samnite society, working the terraced fields and valley bottoms that provided the agricultural surplus necessary to support craft specialists and military activities. Archaeological surveys reveal extensive field systems with stone-built terraces, irrigation channels and storage facilities demonstrating sophisticated agricultural techniques adapted to mountainous terrain. Rural settlements consisted of scattered homesteads rather than nucleated villages, with individual families controlling specific plots while participating in larger community activities. The seasonal nature of mountain agriculture created opportunities for farmers to engage in pastoral activities, moving flocks to high mountain pastures during summer while maintaining agricultural plots in valleys. This dual economy provided resilience against crop failures while creating additional sources of wealth. Craftsmen occupied a distinctive position with specialized skills, providing both economic opportunities and social status. Metalwork represented the most prestigious craft specialization, with bronze and iron workers producing weapons, tools, ornaments, and religious objects, demonstrating exceptional technical skill. Workshops at Montevirano contained furnaces, anvils, and specialized tools indicating large-scale production operations. The discovery of unfinished weapons and raw materials suggests these workshops supplied military equipment not only for local warriors, but for communities throughout the Confederation. The standardization of weapon types and decorative motifs across Samnite territory indicates either centralized production or shared training traditions among craftsmen. Religious leaders held positions of particular importance, serving as intermediaries between human and divine realms while maintaining ritual knowledge necessary for proper conduct of religious ceremonies. The complexity of Samnite religious practices required specialized training and extensive memorization of ritual procedures, creating a distinct class of religious specialists. Hercules emerged as a particularly important deity, with sanctuaries dedicated to the hero god found throughout their territory. The appeal of Hercules to Samnite communities likely reflected his association with strength, endurance, and victory over adversity, qualities particularly relevant to mountain-dwelling warrior societies. Part 8. Now here's where things get really interesting. How did these mountain warriors end up in a death struggle with Rome? The collision was almost inevitable. Roman expansion was pushing southward from the Latin plain into the fertile valleys that had long served as Samnite corridors of influence. The Liris River Valley served as the primary corridor for early contact, with Roman colonization extending up the valley, while Samnite communities maintained traditional grazing routes in the upper reaches. Archaeological evidence reveals the material traces of this convergence, Roman pottery and construction techniques appearing alongside traditional Samnite artifacts, at settlements that had previously shown purely indigenous cultural patterns. Roman merchants and traders preceded military expansion, establishing commercial relationships with Samnite communities that possessed valuable resources and controlled crucial mountain passes. The Samnites controlled extensive iron ore deposits in their mountain territories, producing high-quality metal that attracted Roman interest as their military needs expanded. Bronze coins from the 5th century BC at sites like Monte Vairano reveal established trade relationships that predated formal diplomatic contact. But commerce inevitably gave way to competition over the real prize, Campania, with its volcanic soils producing agricultural surpluses that could support large populations and fund military expansion. The first documented treaty between Rome and the Samnites, concluded around 354 BC according to Livy, established the Liris River as a formal boundary between their respective spheres of influence. Rome acknowledged Samnite control over mountainous territories to the east, while the Samnites accepted Roman dominance over the Latin plain and coastal regions to the west. The treaty included provisions for mutual defense against common enemies, particularly the Gallic tribes, whose periodic raids threatened both powers. But this diplomatic stability faced increasing pressure from both sides' expanding territorial ambitions, particularly regarding control over Campania, the wealthy region lying between their respective heartlands. Capua, the wealthiest city in Campania, represented the ultimate prize. Located at the center of the Campanian plain, it possessed agricultural wealth and craft production capabilities that either Rome or the Samnites could use to support further expansion. In 343 BC, when Capuan envoys arrived in Rome requesting immediate military assistance against Samnite forces threatening the city, Rome faced a crucial decision: honor their treaty with the Samnites and reject Capua's appeal, or violate the agreement and risk war for control of Campania's wealth. They chose war, and thus began over 50 years of brutal conflict that would transform both civilizations. The First Samnite War, 343-341 BC, opened with Roman forces advancing into the Auga Falernus north of Capua. The Roman army's composition reflected their evolving manipular system, smaller tactical units, providing greater flexibility than earlier phalanx formations. But the Samnites weren't fighting on Rome's terms. Rather than meeting Roman formations in direct confrontation, Samnite commanders positioned their forces to control key terrain features, forcing the Romans to fight on ground of Samnite choosing. Archaeological evidence from battlefield sites reveals weapon fragments scattered across strategic hilltops and valley approaches that commanded the routes between the mountains and the coastal plain. The campaign developed into a series of skirmishes and minor engagements as both sides maneuvered for tactical advantage. Roman forces established fortified camps following standard practice, creating secure bases from which they could launch operations while maintaining supply lines. But Samnite forces focused on disrupting these supply lines and isolating Roman detachments during foraging operations. The siege of Saticula represented one of the campaign's most significant engagements, with Roman forces attempting to capture this strategic fortress, controlling access routes between Campania and the Samnite heartland. The town's position on a prominent hill provided natural defensive advantages enhanced with substantial fortification walls using characteristic polygonal masonry. The war's conclusion through the peace treaty of 341 BC established new territorial arrangements that confirmed Roman control over Capua and substantial portions of northern Campania, while acknowledging Samnite sovereignty over their traditional mountain territories. But this peace lasted barely 15 years before fundamental contradictions between Roman territorial ambitions and Samnite confederation interests erupted into open warfare again. The immediate catalyst emerged from Neapolis, the Greek city whose strategic harbour and extensive trade networks had long attracted both Roman commercial interests and Samnite territorial expansion. When Samnite forces occupied the city's Acropolis in 327 BC at the invitation of the democratic faction, Roman perception of this action as violating their sphere of influence made military confrontation inevitable. The Second Samnite War, 326–304 BC, would prove far more brutal and decisive than the first. Roman siege operations against Neapolis began in 326 BC with construction of extensive circumvallation works designed to isolate the city from external support. These fortifications incorporated sophisticated engineering techniques, multiple defensive lines, artillery positions, secure supply corridors, demonstrating Roman military engineering capabilities. But the real turning point came in 321 BC at a narrow mountain pass that would become the most infamous location in Roman military history, the Caudine Forks. Imagine being a Roman soldier in that trapped army. You've marched for days through increasingly narrow valleys, and your commanders have assured you the pass ahead is undefended. Your scouts reported no enemy forces. So you keep marching deeper into the valley, until suddenly you realize the valley has no exit. There's a cliff face ahead blocking your path. You turn around to retreat, and that's when you see them. Samnite warriors blocking the entrance you came through, with thousands more lining the steep hillsides above you. You can't deploy into battle formation because the valley is too narrow. You can't charge uphill because the slopes are too steep, and your enemies hold the high ground. You can't even fight because doing so would just result in your entire army being slaughtered without achieving anything. You're not defeated, you're simply checkmated. Gaius Pontius, the Samnite commander who conceived this trap, understood something fundamental about mountain warfare that Romans had never grasped. In the mountains, geography is a weapon more powerful than any army. He'd identified the perfect killing ground, used misinformation to lure Roman forces into it, and then sprung his trap with perfect timing. The surrender negotiations that followed revealed both Samnite military effectiveness and their sophisticated understanding of political warfare. Rather than massacring the trapped Romans, which would have been militarily easy, Pontius demanded their surrender under terms that would maximize the political impact of Samnite victory while avoiding the diplomatic complications of destroying entire Roman armies. The humiliation ceremony imposed on the surrendering Romans became one of the most memorable events in Roman military history. The entire army, all 20,000 men, was forced to pass beneath a yoke constructed from Samnite spears, while their commanders formally acknowledged defeat. This ritual humiliation, conducted according to traditional military customs, served multiple purposes. It demonstrated Samnite military superiority to audiences throughout Italy, humiliated Roman prestige among their allies, and established precedent for future negotiations. Roman soldiers who survived that day never forgot it. The shame burned so deeply that Rome's Senate immediately repudiated the surrender agreement, arguing that the trapped commanders had exceeded their authority and that Rome was not bound by agreements made under duress. Roman recovery from the Caudine Forks disaster required both military reforms and diplomatic efforts. Military reforms focused on improving capabilities for mountain warfare and reducing vulnerability to tactical ambushes. These included enhanced reconnaissance procedures, improved communication between separated units, and tactical modifications enabling Roman formations to operate more effectively in broken terrain. But the most significant strategic adaptation was the construction of fortified colonies throughout contested territories. These colonies, established at strategic locations, provided secure bases for Roman operations while creating permanent Roman presence in previously contested areas. The colony at Luceria, established in 314 BC, deep within Samnite territory, exemplified this strategic approach. Positioned where it could monitor confederation activities while providing a base for offensive operations, Luceria enabled Roman forces to threaten Samnite supply lines and communication routes. Archaeological excavations reveal extensive defensive works, multiple wall circuits, sophisticated gate systems, demonstrating the military engineering capabilities Romans devoted to these strategic positions. Roman road construction accelerated dramatically, with multiple projects creating secure communication and supply networks. The Via Appia's extension southward from Capua provided the primary strategic highway, while additional roads linked various Roman colonies. The Samnites understood that these roads represented permanent threats to their strategic mobility and defensive advantages. Systematic Samnite attacks against road construction projects and completed highways required Romans to dedicate substantial forces to protecting their engineering works. These infrastructure conflicts created additional theatres stretching both sides' military resources while determining the long-term strategic balance. But despite Roman infrastructure advantages and organizational superiority, the Samnites had one final card to play, and it was their most ambitious gamble yet. The formation of what Roman historians called the Great Italic Coalition in 298 BC represented the most ambitious diplomatic achievement in pre-Roman Italian history. The Samnites united peoples across vast geographical and cultural distances in common cause against Roman expansion. This coalition brought together Samnite confederation warriors with Etruscan city-states from central Italy, Umbrian tribes from the northern Apennines, and Gallic warriors from beyond the Alps, creating a multi-ethnic alliance that threatened Roman dominance throughout the peninsula. For Rome, this was existential threat. Every enemy they'd ever faced united under coordinated command, attacking simultaneously from multiple directions. Samnite envoys had traveled extensively throughout central and northern Italy during 299-298 BC, presenting detailed arguments about Roman territorial ambitions and the inevitable fate awaiting communities that failed to resist. These diplomatic missions required sophisticated understanding of diverse political systems, with Samnite representatives adapting their appeals to address specific concerns of each potential ally. Etruscan participation reflected their growing alarm at Roman encroachment on territories they'd controlled for centuries. The greater Etruscan cities contributed substantial military contingents, bringing advanced military technologies including sophisticated siege equipment, cavalry formations, and metallurgical expertise that significantly enhanced the coalition's capabilities. Umbrian tribal participation brought mountain warfare expertise from the northern Apennines, along with detailed knowledge of terrain features that could facilitate coalition movements. The Umbrian tribes controlled crucial mountain passes connecting Etruria with the Adriatic coast, making their cooperation essential for coordinated operations. But the inclusion of Gallic forces represented the coalition's most dramatic achievement, bringing Celtic warriors from beyond the Alps who possessed fearsome reputations and distinctive fighting capabilities that had previously terrorized Roman armies. These Gallic contingents, primarily from the Senones tribe, controlling territories along the Adriatic coast, contributed approximately 30,000 warriors whose presence fundamentally altered Roman strategic calculations. Gallic warriors fought with distinctive equipment including long swords, oval shields, and chainmail armor, providing different tactical capabilities compared to traditional Italian military systems. And their military culture emphasized individual combat prowess and aggressive assault tactics, proving particularly effective against Roman formations when properly coordinated with other coalition forces. Roman historians consistently emphasized the terror inspired by Gallic charges, their long hair, painted shields, fierce battle cries, creating impressions that lingered long after specific engagements concluded. The coordination of this diverse coalition required unprecedented diplomatic and military organization, with Samnites as primary organizers establishing communication networks and command structures that could function across vast distances and cultural differences. The campaign of 298 BC opened with simultaneous coalition attacks across multiple fronts, demonstrating the effectiveness of their coordinated planning. Samnite armies advanced toward Roman positions in Campania, while Etruscan forces launched attacks against Roman colonies in central Italy. Umbrian raiders disrupted Roman supply lines through Apennine passes, while Gallic warriors threatened Roman territories from the northeast, creating a strategic crisis requiring Roman commanders to divide attention across unprecedented geographical distances. The Roman response involved mobilizing resources on a scale previously unknown in their history. Multiple armies assembled to address threats in different theaters while maintaining adequate reserves for unexpected developments. The decisive confrontation occurred in 295 BC at Sentinum, where coalition forces concentrated for what all participants recognized would determine the war's outcome. Coalition army included approximately 40,000 Samnite warriors, 25,000 Etruscan infantry and cavalry, 20,000 Umbrian tribal fighters, and 30,000 Gallic warriors, creating a force of unprecedented size and diversity threatening to overwhelm Roman defensive capabilities through sheer numerical superiority combined with tactical diversity. Roman forces under consuls Quintus, Fabius, Maximus Rullianus, and Publius Decius Mus totaled roughly 40,000 legionaries plus allied contingents, facing the largest battle ever fought on Italian soil to that point. The Battle of Sentinum became a grinding, brutal affair where both sides demonstrated their maximum capabilities. The coalition deployed with Gallic warriors on one wing opposite Decius Mus, while Samnite forces faced Fabius on the other wing. The Gallic charge on the Roman left wing achieved initial devastating success, breaking through Roman lines and threatening to roll up the entire Roman position. Decius Mus, seeing his wing collapsing, performed the devotio, the ritual self-sacrifice where a Roman commander dedicated himself and enemy forces to the underworld gods before charging into enemy ranks to die. This supreme act of sacrifice rallied his troops even as he fell, giving Fabius time to reposition reserves and launch a devastating cavalry charge into the Gallic flank. The Samnite wing fought with desperate fury, knowing this represented their last chance to stop Roman expansion. For hours, neither side gained decisive advantage as Samnite warriors held their ground against repeated Roman assaults, but the collapse of the Gallic wing eventually exposed their flank, forcing Samnite commanders to order retreat before their forces could be surrounded and annihilated. The coalition army had been defeated but not destroyed. Thousands of Samnites fought their way clear, retreating to their mountain strongholds to continue resistance. But the strategic situation had fundamentally changed. The coalition had failed. The Etruscans and Gauls withdrew to their own territories, leaving the Samnites to face Rome alone. The final phase of the Third Samnite War, 294–290 BC, saw systematic Roman conquest of Samnite territories. Roman armies advanced along multiple axes, capturing fortified positions one by one, constructing roads through previously impassable terrain, establishing colonies that ensured permanent control. The Samnites fought with the desperation of people watching their civilization disappear. Every mountain pass became a battlefield. Every fortress held out until supplies were exhausted. Every warrior knew that surrender meant the end of everything their ancestors had built. The final battle occurred at Aquilonia in 293 BC, where a Samnite army making a last stand was crushed by Roman forces. The confederation system that had sustained Samnite independence for centuries collapsed as community after community accepted Roman terms. The systematic transformation of Samnite territories following their defeat represented one of Rome's most comprehensive exercises in territorial integration. Roman colonization efforts focused on establishing secure military control over strategic positions. The colony of Venusia, founded in 291 BC with 20,000 colonists, exemplified this approach, positioning a substantial Roman population at a crucial location controlling access routes between the former Samnite heartland and Greek cities of southern Italy. The colony's massive defensive walls enclosed an area of nearly 600 hectares, making it one of the largest Roman foundations of the period. Road construction projects created permanent infrastructure connecting former Samnite territories with the broader Roman road network, fundamentally altering communication patterns and economic relationships. The Via Appia extension beyond Capua reached Venusia by 285 BC, providing secure year-round transportation for military forces, commercial goods, and administrative personnel. Administrative reorganization involved establishing new governmental structures, combining Roman institutional models with adaptations necessary for governing diverse populations. The creation of municipia provided frameworks for local self-government that preserved community autonomy while ensuring Roman supervision of essential functions including taxation, military recruitment, and legal administration. Despite systematic Romanization efforts, substantial elements of traditional Samnite cultural identity persisted. Archaeological evidence from sites like Pietrabondante reveals continued religious activities at traditional sanctuaries well into the 2nd century BC. The Oscan language maintained its position as primary means of communication throughout much of the former territory, with inscriptional evidence revealing continued use despite increasing exposure to Latin. Public inscriptions from 3rd and 2nd centuries BC demonstrate bilingual practices, official documents often appearing in both Latin and Oscan versions, serving different audiences. But the question of citizenship, of genuine political equality within the Roman system, remained unresolved. Communities granted civitas sine suffragio possessed Roman legal protections while requiring the same military service obligations as full citizens, yet they couldn't vote in Roman assemblies or hold Roman magistracies. These inequalities created mounting frustrations among populations, contributing substantial resources and manpower to Roman military efforts, while lacking influence over policies affecting their daily lives. Veterans returning from successful campaigns observed differential treatment accorded to citizens versus non-citizens, developing awareness of practical disadvantages associated with their subordinate legal status. The Social War, 91-88 BC, represented the explosion of these accumulated grievances. When the tribune Marcus Livius Drusus proposed extending full citizenship to Italian allies, conservative Roman senators blocked the legislation and had Drusus assassinated. Italian communities throughout the peninsula, including the former Samnite territories, revolted en masse, establishing a rival Italian confederation at Corfinium with its own senate, magistrates, and army. The Social War became a brutal conflict where former allies who had fought side by side against Rome's enemies now fought each other. Rome eventually granted citizenship to end the rebellion, but the victory came too late to prevent deeper resentments from festering. When civil war erupted between Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla in 88 BC, Samnite communities saw an opportunity to pursue their political objectives through alliance with Roman factions. The Samnites supported Marius, whose populist policies promised genuine political equality for new citizens. Marian recruitment efforts found receptive audiences among veterans of the Social War who possessed military experience while harboring resentments against the Roman aristocratic establishment. Samnite forces participated in the siege of Rome during 87 BC, contributing substantially to Marian success in capturing the city. But Sulla's return from eastern campaigns in 83 BC created immediate threats to political gains Samnite communities had achieved. Sullan propaganda specifically targeted Italian allies as enemies of traditional Roman values, promising to reverse citizenship grants and political reforms. The prospect of Sullan victory threatened not only specific benefits received during Marian control, but fundamental legal status as Roman citizens. Pontius Telesinus emerged as the primary Samnite military leader, combining inherited warrior traditions with sophisticated understanding of contemporary strategic requirements. His strategic planning for the final assault on Rome reflected his assessment that Samnite survival required decisive military action that would eliminate sullen threats before they could consolidate control. The decisive battle occurred at the Colline Gate in November 82nd BC. Telesinus led the largest Samnite army since the Social War in a desperate assault on Rome itself, coming within moments of capturing the city and changing Roman history. The fighting raged through the night, with neither side able to gain decisive advantage. Samnite warriors fought with the fury of people who knew this was their last chance. Defeat meant not just military loss, but cultural annihilation. Roman sources describe the battle's ferocity, with Telesinus himself fighting in the front ranks until he fell mortally wounded. At dawn, Sulla's forces finally broke through Samnite lines, turning the battle into a rout and then a massacre. The aftermath was genocidal. Sulla ordered the systematic execution of Samnite prisoners. Sources claim 8,000 were slaughtered in a single day. In the Villa Publica, while Sulla addressed the Senate, the screams audible during his speech. Samnite lands were confiscated on a massive scale, with Roman veterans receiving land grants in fertile valleys that had previously supported Samnite agricultural communities. Surviving Samnite populations were relocated to marginal highland areas or absorbed into colonial settlements as dependent laborers. The goal was clear: eliminate Samnite political identity permanently. Yet paradoxically, this brutal suppression accelerated cultural transformations that enabled Samnite traditions to survive in modified forms. The sanctuary at Pietrabondante underwent significant architectural modifications during the Augustan period, with new construction incorporating classical Roman architectural elements while maintaining traditional religious functions. Samnite religious iconography underwent sophisticated processes of cultural adaptation, preserving essential symbolic meanings while adopting visual forms acceptable to Roman authorities. Bronze votive offerings display hybrid artistic styles combining traditional Samnite warrior imagery with Roman military equipment and imperial symbols. The gradual disappearance of the Oscan language represented one of the most significant cultural transformations, though this linguistic shift proceeded through complex processes, preserving substantial elements of traditional vocabulary within Latin linguistic frameworks. Inscriptional evidence reveals bilingual practices persisting well into the 1st century AD, with official documents appearing in both Latin and Oscan. The latest securely dated Oscan inscriptions appear on religious dedications from the Flavian period, suggesting traditional linguistic practices survived longest in religious contexts where conservative tendencies naturally preserved archaic forms. Despite Romanization, notable Samnite families achieved prominence within imperial Roman society. The Ponti family, despite their association with resistance leadership, produced individuals who achieved positions in imperial administrative and military service during the 1st century AD. Military service provided particularly important pathways for social advancement, as traditional warrior skills and organizational capabilities proved highly valuable for imperial military operations. Archaeological evidence from military sites throughout the empire reveals soldiers whose equipment and burial practices suggest origins in former Samnite territories, indicating these regions continued providing substantial military manpower. The persistence of traditional craft production techniques demonstrates the selective nature of Romanization processes that preserved economically valuable skills. Metalwork traditions continued at sites like Monte Vairano, where archaeological deposits from the early imperial period reveal continued production of high-quality bronze and iron implements using traditional techniques. Pottery production underwent similar transformations, preserving technical expertise while adapting stylistic elements to conform with imperial aesthetic preferences. Textile production maintained traditional techniques while adapting to serve imperial luxury markets that valued exotic regional products. Medieval references to Samnite history emerge primarily through preservation and transmission of classical historical texts, particularly Livy's account, which became standard sources for medieval chroniclers. The Chronicle of Monte Cassino incorporated references to Samnite history within broader narratives emphasizing the transformation of pagan mountain peoples into Christian communities through Roman conquest and subsequent religious conversion. Regional identity formation during the medieval period incorporated selective elements of Samnite historical memory, emphasizing martial valor and resistance to external domination. Local noble families throughout central Italy claimed descent from Samnite warriors as means of establishing legitimacy and distinguishing themselves from foreign rulers. Renaissance humanist scholars developed more sophisticated approaches emphasizing critical analysis of ancient sources while seeking to understand the broader significance of Italian political development before Roman conquest. Flavio Biondo's Italia Illustrata provided comprehensive geographical and historical analysis combining classical literary sources with contemporary archaeological observations and local traditions. The emergence of antiquarian studies during 16th and 17th centuries created systematic approaches to Samnite historical research emphasizing material evidence alongside literary sources. Scholars like Leandro Alberti and Antonio Sanfelice conducted detailed investigations of ancient sites throughout former Samnite territories, documenting architectural remains, inscriptional evidence, and local traditions. Early nationalist movements during 18th and 19th centuries adopted Samnite historical examples as symbols of Italian resistance to foreign domination. The Neapolitan Revolution of 1799 explicitly invoked Samnite historical precedents, with revolutionary leaders claiming to restore the ancient Italian confederation that had resisted Roman imperialism. The Risorgimento period witnessed extensive scholarly and popular interest in Samnite history as evidence of ancient Italian political unity and cultural achievement, supporting arguments for contemporary Italian unification. Historians such as Carlo Troia and Luigi Tosti developed comprehensive studies emphasizing continuities between ancient Italian political traditions and contemporary nationalist movements. Archaeological research during the 19th century revolutionized understanding of Samnite civilization through systematic excavation of major sites, revealing sophistication of urban planning, religious institutions, and artistic achievements. Excavations at Pietrabondante begun during the 1840s uncovered the extensive sanctuary complex with elaborate theatre and temple buildings demonstrating architectural capabilities comparable to major Greek and Roman sites. The development of scientific archaeology during late 19th and early 20th centuries enabled more sophisticated analysis of Samnite material culture through stratigraphic excavation techniques and systematic artifact analysis. Modern archaeological techniques developed during mid-20th century enabled comprehensive landscape archaeology, revealing the full extent of Samnite territorial organization and settlement patterns. Aerial photography and systematic field surveys documented extensive networks of fortified settlements, agricultural terraces, and communication routes demonstrating sophisticated territorial management. Linguistic research into the Oscan language provided crucial insights into Samnite cultural and political institutions through detailed analysis of inscriptional evidence. The decipherment of major finds, such as the Agnone tablet, revealed sophisticated legal terminology and complex governmental procedures demonstrating political development comparable to other major Mediterranean civilizations. Contemporary archaeological research continues revolutionizing understanding through advanced techniques including ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery analysis, and sophisticated dating methods enabling precise chronological analysis. Recent excavations at sites throughout former Samnite territories have revealed evidence for international trade relationships, advanced metallurgical techniques, and sophisticated artistic traditions demonstrating their integration into broader Mediterranean cultural networks. The recognition of Samnite cultural heritage in modern Italian regional identity has created new appreciation for their historical significance while supporting tourism and cultural preservation efforts throughout central and southern Italy. Archaeological parks established at major Samnite sites provide public access to important historical locations while protecting these cultural resources for future research and education. The archaeological park at Pietrabondante offers visitors opportunities to experience the impressive sanctuary complex while learning about Samnite religious practices and political organization through interpretive programs combining scholarly research with engaging public presentation. Educational programs developed by regional universities and cultural institutions promote scholarly research into Samnite history while training new generations of archaeologists and historians specializing in pre-Roman Italian civilization. Cultural preservation efforts throughout former Samnite territories emphasize protecting archaeological sites and historical landscapes from modern development pressures while maintaining accessibility for research and public education. Local governments have implemented protective legislation and planning procedures balancing economic development with cultural heritage preservation, creating frameworks for sustainable tourism supporting regional economies while protecting irreplaceable historical resources. The integration of Samnite historical memory into contemporary Italian cultural identity reflects broader recognition of the peninsula's diverse cultural heritage and the importance of pre-Roman civilizations in shaping Italian historical development. The enduring legacy of Samnite civilization continues influencing contemporary understanding of Italian cultural identity, regional autonomy, and resistance to external domination. Their sophisticated confederation system, military capabilities, and cultural achievements demonstrate that pre-Roman Italy encompassed diverse and accomplished civilizations whose contributions to Italian historical development deserve recognition alongside Roman accomplishments. Modern appreciation for Samnite heritage reflects growing understanding of cultural diversity and the importance of preserving historical memory as foundations for contemporary identity and cultural pride. Thanks for watching Flow of History. If you've made it this far, you've just experienced the incredible story of the Samnites, mountain warriors, who came closer to stopping Rome than anyone else in Italy, who created one of the ancient world's most innovative political systems, and who fought for over 50 years to preserve their independence before finally being absorbed into the Roman Empire. But here's the thing, their story isn't just ancient history. The Samnite confederation system influenced later Italian political thought. Their resistance to centralized authority resonates through Italian regional identity even today. And their ultimate fate, cultural absorption, while preserving elements of distinct identity, is a pattern we see repeated throughout history whenever empires expand and local cultures adapt to survive. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because we're diving deep into other ancient civilizations that challenged Rome, from the Etruscans who taught Rome everything they knew, to the Carthaginians who nearly destroyed them, to the Germanic tribes who finally brought down the Western Empire. Drop a comment below. What shocked you most about the Samnites, the Caudine Forks trap, their sophisticated confederation system, the fact they allied with Gauls, Etruscans and Umbrians against Rome, or maybe the genocidal aftermath of the Colline Gate? Let me know. And if you want to support the channel and get access to extended content, detailed battle analyses and archaeological site tours, check out our Patreon in the description. Until next time, remember, history belongs to those who write it, but the truth belongs to those who dig it up. This is Flow of History, reminding you that every empire eventually faces the mountains. See you in the next one.